The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of engineering. A massive, ring-shaped station orbiting the luminous star Itiris IV, its countless levels and corridors bustling with representatives from every corner of known space. Amidst this cosmopolitan chaos, humanity's delegation often seemed like newcomers to a party that had been going on for centuries. Earth had only recently joined the Council as a junior member, its ships and technologies modest compared to the interstellar empires that had helped found the coalition. Still, humanity held its own. They contributed scientific research, navigational data, and trade goods unique to their isolated region of space. Most saw Earth as harmless, perhaps even naive, a planet eager to prove itself among a far older, more advanced assembly of species. That perception made the betrayal all the more shocking. It began with a rumor, as these things often do. Whispers in the corridors of power, murmurs in the shadowy recesses of the Council's many bureaucratic layers. A human aide overheard a conversation, something about live experimentation and enhanced interrogation. At first, the words meant little. The aide mentioned it in passing, and their superior dismissed it as typical gossip. The Council had a reputation for heavy-handedness, yes, but not for outright cruelty. They were the keepers of galactic order, the ones who brokered peace and enacted strict regulations to prevent the kind of wars that had once ravaged entire star clusters. Their methods could be draconian, but they weren't sadistic. Or so everyone thought. The aide's report might have vanished into the bureaucracy, buried under piles of trade disputes and border skirmishes, but then the footage appeared. It was a short video, barely 2 minutes long. It arrived on the private comm channel of a human journalist stationed at the Council chamber. The journalist had no idea who sent it, and the metadata had been scrubbed. The video showed a human child, no older than 7 or 8, restrained on a surgical table surrounded by alien machinery. The child's face twisted in terror as strange, serpentine appendages injected something into their bloodstream. The sound was muted, but the expressions, the flinching, the silent screaming, needed no translation. The journalist's initial reaction was disbelief. It couldn't be real. Maybe it was a sick hoax. But when they ran an analysis, the video passed every test. The child was identified as one of Earth's own, a missing child reported nearly a year ago. Their DNA and facial recognition matched the Council's own official records. And the background, that was the clincher. The machines bore the insignia of the Council's Division of Xenobiological Studies, a prestigious branch stationed in the inner systems, known for its cutting-edge work in medicine and biology. The journalist released the footage publicly, sending it out through secure human channels first, then spreading it to allied media hubs. Earth erupted in outrage. Governments called emergency sessions. Protesters gathered outside every known Council embassy on human colonies. Families of missing persons demanded answers, waving images of loved ones who had vanished after the Council's relocation programs, following Earth's admission into the coalition. The Council's response was swift and predictable. They called the video a fabrication, accusing Earth of spreading disinformation to undermine the coalition. The High Arbiter, a multi-limbed Regavan whose voice could boom across a chamber without amplification, declared the footage an elaborate forgery designed to sow mistrust and division. The Council refused to allow independent investigators into the research facility shown in the video. Human representatives demanded access, but their requests were ignored or deferred indefinitely. Tensions escalated. Human trade ships began facing random inspections in Council-controlled space. Delegates were suddenly met with vague accusations of non-compliance in unrelated matters. The human ambassador, a seasoned diplomat named Tessa Marlowe, pushed back at every opportunity. She quoted treaty articles, pointed to clauses about transparency and mutual trust, but her protests only seemed to harden the Council's resolve. Rumors began circulating that human envoys were being surveilled, their communications monitored. Some claimed that a few lower-ranking envoys had even vanished without explanation. Officially, the Council denied everything. Back on Earth, the situation was spiraling. Public opinion turned from anger to despair. People wondered aloud if humanity had been wrong to join the Council in the first place. Others questioned if Earth could survive a confrontation with such a powerful body. Yet beneath the uncertainty, a sense of resolve was growing. Leaders of Earth's colonies convened in private, discussing the need for independent defense measures. For the first time since unification, Earth began redirecting resources into military expansion, quietly at first, but with increasing urgency. But this wasn't just Earth's problem. The footage had caught the attention of other species, particularly those who had long felt marginalized or oppressed by the Council's more domineering policies. Fringe systems and smaller colonies whispered of rebellion, of a day when the Council might finally be held accountable. Yet none of them wanted to move first. They watched humanity closely, wondering if this young, angry species might just have the audacity to stand up to the galaxy's most powerful authority. And all the while, the human child from the footage haunted every debate, every speech, every whispered conversation. That child, scared, alone, and abandoned, became a symbol, a stark reminder of what was at stake. The faint lights of resistance began to appear in the darkness of betrayal. Across human colonies and sympathetic outposts, people stirred. What had started as isolated protests and boycotts grew into something bigger, something coordinated. Messages raced through encrypted channels, carried by trusted couriers and secure drones. Earth's fledgling military was not enough to challenge the Galactic Council directly, not yet, but the fight didn't have to be conventional. This was a battle for hearts, minds, and worlds, and Earth's leaders were about to light the fuse. Commander. Elias Drayton, a retired Earth Navy officer called back into service, was one of the first to grasp what was truly needed. "They've got bigger ships, better weapons, in the ear of half the galaxy," he told the Defense Council in a closed-door meeting. "But what they don't have, what they'll never have, is trust. We just need to show people that it's not just our fight, it's theirs too." Drayton was right. The Council's hegemony had bred resentment in more than one corner of the galaxy. Trade worlds along the outer rim had long chafed under harsh tariffs. Fringe colonies that had petitioned for support against raiders were routinely ignored. Entire species, once powerful in their own regions, had been reduced to vassal states under the Council's protection agreements. The footage of the tortured human child was the breaking point. It was proof not only of the Council's hypocrisy, but of their cruelty. A cruelty that could no longer be hidden. One of the first systems to join Earth's cause was the Peridani Commonwealth, a collection of planets known for their strong sense of independence and robust merchant fleets. When Peridani delegates spoke out against the Council in a widely broadcast session, Earth's leaders seized the moment. They opened direct communication lines with the Commonwealth, promising mutual support and shared resources. Soon, Peridani freighters were quietly ferrying weapons and supplies to human colonies, and their pilots started running interference in Council-dominated trade routes. From there, the rebellion spread like a slow but unstoppable blaze. The Larnax Confederation, a once mighty power that had been beaten down into a glorified client state, declared neutrality, then gradually began providing safe harbor to rebel ships. The Osid League, known for its industrial capacity and sprawling, asteroid mining operations, started leaking critical materials to the resistance under the guise of routine exports. Earth itself became a hub of underground activity. Scientists, engineers, and strategists worked around the clock in hidden facilities. Old shipyards were repurposed to retrofit cargo vessels into makeshift warships. Retired generals met with guerrilla fighters to plan asymmetrical strikes on Council installations. Hackers formed digital strike teams, using their skills to gather intelligence and disrupt Council communications. In these early days, the rebellion wasn't just about massive fleets or battles over strategic planets. It was about daring raids on Council outposts, hijacking supply ships, and broadcasting the truth. The footage of the child was spliced with testimonies from defectors, Council technicians, soldiers, and even a few lower-tier bureaucrats who had seen the inner workings of the so-called Division of Xenobiological Studies. These whistleblowers told harrowing tales of specimen collection protocols and experimental programs that targeted not just humans, but other species too. The rebels turned these stories into a torrent of propaganda that flooded the galaxy. For every denial the council issued, another survivor or witness came forward. Images and first-hand accounts painted the council as a bloated, corrupt empire, hiding behind its reputation as a peacekeeper. While the council tried to maintain control through blockades and crackdowns, every harsh measure only strengthened the rebel cause. When council forces raided a human colony and imprisoned dozens of citizens, the footage of their suffering stoked even greater outrage. Protests erupted on neutral worlds, and even some council-aligned species began questioning their leaders' actions. Amid this rising tide of rebellion, the human child from the original footage became a symbol. Resistance fighters wore patches bearing the image of the child's terrified face. Pilots stenciled it onto their ships, and insurgents planted holographic projections of the child's pleading eyes on walls across occupied worlds. It wasn't just Earth fighting anymore. It was every species, every colony that had ever felt the Council's boot on their neck. And still, Earth had to tread carefully. Many of its newfound allies were cautious, fearful of the Council's wrath. The rebellion grew, but it was fragile, held together by anger, desperation, and the hope that a better galaxy could rise from the Council's ashes. Trust between factions was slow to build, and not every group shared the same vision for the future. Earth's leaders knew that the rebellion couldn't survive on outrage alone. They needed victories, real, tangible wins, to prove that the Council could bleed. When a rebel strike force managed to capture a key Council logistics hub, the news sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The hub had been considered untouchable, its defenses impregnable, yet the rebels not only infiltrated it, but also stole critical data, transport schedules, troop deployments, and evidence of more secret experiments. With this data, the rebels launched a series of coordinated strikes, hitting supply lines and weakening the Council's grip on its outer territories. Each small victory added to the rebellion's momentum. Council-aligned worlds began to hedge, their bets quietly supporting the rebels in exchange for future guarantees of autonomy. The Council's own ranks showed signs of fracture, as mid-level officers and diplomats questioned their orders or resigned altogether. The unity that had held the Council together for centuries started to splinter. As Earth's forces and their allies continued to gain ground, the movement evolved from a disorganized resistance into a legitimate threat. Once dismissed as a collection of rebels and pirates, they now posed a clear and present danger to the Council's rule. Earth had lit the fire, and now the galaxy was watching to see if that fire would consume the Council entirely. The rebellion's strategy shifted as it grew stronger. What began as isolated raids and hit-and-run attacks evolved into a relentless campaign of destruction. Human fleets, now bolstered by ships and crews from allied systems, surged into Council territories. They targeted supply depots, communication relays, and research stations. Once pristine Council worlds, planets that had known centuries of prosperity and peace, began to feel the heat of war. The fall of Paris II marked a turning point. Paris II had been a thriving Council hub, a world celebrated for its crystalline towers and gardens that sprawled for miles. Its orbital shipyards produced the Council's most advanced cruisers. The rebellion's leadership deemed it an essential target. A combined fleet of human warships and Paradani strike craft launched a surprise assault. After a ferocious battle, the rebels claimed the planet, destroying the shipyards and seizing the Council's precious reserves of armored hull alloys. The Council retaliated by sending a massive fleet, but they found the planet scorched, the cities abandoned, and the rebels long gone. From Paris II, the rebel fleets turned their focus on other critical Council systems. Some they raided and fled, others they left smoldering, a warning to the Council that its heartland was no longer safe. In the midst of this offensive, Earth's propaganda machine worked overtime. Images of burning Council worlds were broadcast across the galaxy. They weren't just demonstrations of strength. They were carefully curated messages designed to show the galaxy that the Council was no longer invincible. The rebellion's brutality was a deliberate choice. Commander Drayton, now one of the rebellion's top military leaders, delivered a grim speech to the coalition's assembled captains. If they think their core worlds are safe, they'll never stop. We have to take the fight to them, show them what it feels like to lose what they've built. They burned our colonies, tortured our children, and now it's their turn to face the fire. Not every rebel leader agreed. Diplomatic envoys from the Ossid League pushed back, arguing for more targeted strikes that spared civilian populations. Others, like the Larnax Confederation, insisted that the Council's civilians were complicit. After all, they'd benefited from the Council's oppression for centuries. The debate simmered, but the majority sided with Drayton's strategy. They would burn their way to the Council's doorstep, sparing no expense and showing no mercy, and burn they did. The industrial moons of Quellan 6 were shattered by precision, bombing runs. The thriving trade hubs of Zion Prime were rendered uninhabitable after relentless orbital strikes. The Council's inner territories, long protected by layers of defenses, were now exposed. For the first time in millennia, Council citizens experienced what countless frontier worlds had endured: starvation, displacement, and terror. Yet this campaign of vengeance came at a cost. The rebels stretched their resources to the breaking point. Supply lines grew perilously thin. Some of their allies, horrified by the destruction, began to withdraw support or reduce contributions. Entire fleets were left stranded without enough fuel or ammunition, forcing them to raid neutral planets to keep the war effort going. The rebellion's reputation, once rooted in righteous anger, began to tarnish. Among the cracks in the rebellion's resolve, a single incident stood out: the burning of Caldris. Caldris was a minor council world, largely agricultural, its people known for their fierce loyalty to the coalition but otherwise harmless. Rebel forces, operating under incomplete intelligence, launched a bombardment they believed was targeting a key council research facility. Instead, they leveled Caldris's largest farming settlements, killing tens of thousands of civilians. The outcry was immediate. Neutral factions condemned the attack. Even within the rebellion, voices rose against the growing collateral damage. Rebel leadership convened a heated session. Drayton defended the strategy. This is war. Innocent people will die. If we start hesitating now, we give the Council time to recover. Time to crush us. His opponents, including several prominent human politicians, argued that the rebellion was at risk of becoming the very thing it fought against. "We can't win by turning every world to ash," said Tessa Marlowe, the human ambassador who had first sounded the alarm. "The galaxy might hate the Council, but they'll never trust us if we keep killing the people we claim to be liberating." The disagreement threatened to fracture the coalition. Some rebel factions continued their scorched earth campaigns while others pulled back, focusing on seizing territory and protecting civilians. The Council seized on this division, sending out propaganda broadcasts that framed the rebellion as a violent mob with no regard for life. They even staged relief efforts on devastated worlds, positioning themselves as saviors to the innocents caught in the crossfire. Despite the mounting tensions, the rebellion refused to relent. Their anger at the Council's atrocities drove them forward. And as they reached deeper into Council space, they uncovered more horrors. Abandoned research facilities yielded records of experiments not only on humans, but on dozens of species. One lab contained the skeletal remains of a being thought to be extinct, dissected and cataloged for biological enhancement research. Another had vats of preserved organic matter, labeled only by numerical codes, hinting at a scale of experimentation far greater than anyone had imagined. These discoveries further fueled the rebellion's rage. Their leaders released the evidence to the galaxy, hoping to rally more allies. Some worlds responded, but others turned away, unwilling to risk their own survival. Even so, the rebel fleets pressed on, burning world after world, leaving the Council's territories scarred and its influence shattered. As the chapter drew to a close, the galaxy stood on the brink of total chaos. The Council's heartland burned, and its fleets were stretched thin. But the rebels, too, were nearing their limit. Their unity was fraying, their supplies dwindling, and their reputation was no longer the symbol of justice it had once been. The galaxy watched as the flames spread, unsure whether the rebellion would collapse under its own weight, or if it would strike the final blow that toppled the Council once and for all. The Galactic Council's central seat of power, Galtria Prime, was once the shining jewel of interstellar civilization. Its immense domed capital shimmered with crystalline spires, and its cities stretched far across its continents, connected by the hum of orbital elevators and the flash of transit hubs. But now, Galtria Prime lay broken, a cityscape of crumbled towers and scorched plains. The rebels had taken the fight to the very core of the Council's authority, and their relentless campaign had left the central world in ruins. As the Council collapsed, so did its fleets. With supply lines obliterated, morale shattered, and key officers defecting or fleeing, the Council's once dominant military fractured. Some units mutinied, others simply deserted. Without the central leadership to guide them, planets that had once thrived under the Council's rule declared their independence. Many celebrated their newfound freedom, but others were left struggling to maintain order as local rivalries resurfaced and crime syndicates moved in to fill the power vacuum. Earth, now considered the symbolic leader of the rebellion, found itself at a crossroads. Victory had come at a staggering cost. Millions of lives were lost. Entire planets were reduced to ash. The allies who had stood beside humanity were demanding answers. The Osid League questioned Earth's willingness to rebuild what they had destroyed. The Paradani Commonwealth pressed for the establishment of a new governing body to prevent the rise of another oppressive regime. Even factions within humanity's own ranks wondered whether all the death and destruction had truly been worth it. Commander Elias Drayton stood on the ruined bridge of his flagship, staring out at a smoldering Galtria Prime. He had spent years fighting for this moment, driving the rebellion forward, forcing the Council to its knees. But as the flames cooled, his victories felt hollow. The child who had once symbolized the rebellion's cause, whose suffering had lit the galaxy's rage, was now just a memory, a face from a propaganda poster. Drayton knew the rebellion had become something else, something far more complicated, and he wondered whether they had burned more than just the Council. Had they burned their own souls in the process? Tessa Marlowe, the human diplomat who had been the voice of restraint throughout the war, arrived at the makeshift Rebel Council on Paris 2. The meeting was tense. Rebel factions argued over territory and governance. Some wanted to divide the former Council territories into sovereign states. Others called for a new centralized government, a coalition led by the species who had suffered most under the old regime. The Paradani pushed for an independent trade confederation, while the Larnax Confederation argued that the Council's core worlds should pay reparations to the countless colonies they had exploited. The Osid League demanded an immediate ban on all experimental research to prevent future atrocities. Marlowe listened as the arguments escalated. Then, as the Council threatened to fracture, she stood. Her voice, weary but determined, cut through the room's rising din. We have fought and bled together to end tyranny, but if we turn on one another now, we'll only create new tyrants. The galaxy doesn't need a single ruler. It doesn't need a council with unchecked power. What we need is trust. We need transparency. And we need to face the hard truth. There is no simple way forward. We must rebuild, not as conquerors, but as equals. Her words carried weight. They reminded the assembled leaders that their goal had never been to replace the Council with another version of itself. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to discuss a framework for a loose coalition, one that would oversee peacekeeping and coordinate aid without wielding the absolute authority the Council once held. The process was messy and far from harmonious, but it was a start. Amid the political turmoil, relief efforts began. Earth dispatched medical teams and engineers to devastated worlds. Former rebel fleets now ferried supplies and evacuated refugees. Ships that once carried bombs and strike teams were refitted to bring clean water and shelter. Some rebel leaders criticized the focus on reconstruction, arguing that the galaxy should be putting resources into securing borders and solidifying their military advantage. But the majority recognized that the galaxy had endured enough destruction. The time had come to rebuild. On the surface of Galtria Prime, Marlowe and Drayton stood together, surveying the ruins. "This is what victory looks like," Drayton said bitterly. Ash and rubble. Victory isn't what matters anymore, Marlowe replied. What matters is what we build from it. Drayton didn't respond. He simply stared at the distant horizon, where smoke still drifted upward, and nodded. In the years that followed, the galaxy slowly stitched itself back together. The coalition that emerged was far from perfect, but it was rooted in a commitment to transparency and cooperation. Former council worlds learned to stand on their own, while newly independent colonies formed alliances for mutual defense. Trade routes reopened, and research once hidden behind closed doors was conducted in the open, under the scrutiny of multiple species and organizations. Yet, scars remained. Burned planets and shattered cities served as constant reminders of the price of war. Millions of refugees struggled to find homes. Deep-seated animosities flared up in border disputes and trade negotiations. The new coalition worked tirelessly to mediate conflicts, but its limited authority meant that many problems lingered unresolved. Still, the galaxy was no longer ruled by fear, and for many, that was enough. As the rebellion's leaders faded into history, their legacy became the subject of heated debate. Some viewed them as heroes who toppled a corrupt regime and freed countless worlds. Others saw them as reckless zealots who left the galaxy in ruins. But one truth remained undeniable. The galaxy was forever changed. In the charred remnants of the Council's reign, a new order had begun to emerge, fragile, flawed, and unsteady, but free. And though the rebellion's banners were taken down, and the images of the tortured human child faded from propaganda, hollows the memory remained. The stars continued their eternal march through the heavens, and the galaxy whispered a promise: to never again let power go unchecked, and to honor the countless lives lost in the fires of revolution.